Welcome back to another episode of Christian Natural Health. Today, I am very excited to have Dr. Moshe Daniel Block. He is the author of The Revolution of Naturopathic Medicine, Remaining True to Our Philosophy, a book about the philosophy and practice of naturopathic medicine, and Holistic Counseling, Introducing the V's Dialogue, a book about a breakthrough healing method uniting the worlds of mind, body medicine, and psychology. He graduated from the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine in Ontario, Canada, in 2000. Dr. Block then went on to complete the Homeopathic Master Clinician course with Louise Klein in 2003. He now focuses his practice doing one-on-one physician heal thyself and mentoring appointments with NDs and students enrolled in his mind-body medicine certification program called Holistic Counseling. He continues to specialize in autoimmune illness and myasthenia gravis, a disease he was personally diagnosed as having and from which he has healed himself. Welcome, Dr. Block. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. DeVille.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. It's really fun to be on your, you call it a show? Is it a show?
Show, podcast. Yeah, take your pick.
Yeah,
Whatever you want to call it.
I love it. I love how, because, mainstream media has so dropped the ball reporting what's really going on accurately, if I may say.
Yeah.
I love how people like yourself and myself as well, and lots of just like grassroots people have popped up, bringing their own news and their own shows and their own, it's a really interesting age that we're in,
Yeah, I know, it definitely is.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about your holistic counseling practice. So that's what your book is mostly about, right? So the V's Dialogue, this kind of like a elevator speech overview of what it is.
Elevator speech. I've never been good at elevator speeches. Like you want to get someone's attention in the first 30 seconds, and
Right.
that's too much pressure for me. Anyway, so my account of holistic counseling is it's a method of asking patients questions to get them reflect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on the idea that the truth resides within the patient.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea in naturopathic medicine we have that the healing power of nature works in the patient. Well, the same thing applies for holistic counseling, is that the truth resides in them. They know what's right for them. They know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that the practitioner is there to ask the questions to get them to reflect deeper and deeper until they actually open up the vaulted, sealed chamber of the subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And they start to see the light of what is residing in the subconscious that is governing their illness or their suffering. It could be mental, emotional, it could be physical.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that, it's a true holistic medicine, in the sense that the idea is that when the physical body is sick, it is reflecting what is going on in the mental, emotional field.
Mm-hmm.
It's a passive observer to what's going on. Lindlar said that the cells do not reason upon what is true or not true from what's being conveyed by the mind and the emotions. They just take on that energy and they reflect it.
Right.
And so illness is as a result, and this is all still part of my elevator speech, by the way.
Yeah. A long elevator ride.
Yeah. It's a lot. We're in New York somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's
New York City. So the mind body, the philosophy of holism is that it's that who we truly are is this I am, this consciousness. You could call it a divine self.
Mm-hmm.
And the mind, when it starts to believe things that are not in harmony with the true self, it creates a new reality around it, around which suffering can begin.
Yeah.
And around which illness begins as well. Physical, mental, and emotional, basically.
So how would you contrast that with like traditional talk therapy, for example? What's the main difference?
Well, the main difference is, so as far as I understand what traditional talk therapy is a lot of the information comes from the practitioner. Mm-hmm. And the patient or the client is listening and absorbing this information as if that is what will help. So that which is going to help is from the sorry?
So it's like directed from the therapist.
It's directed from the outside, from the practitioner, and it's therefore kind of like allopathic in nature. Mm-hmm. That it subtly in this at the subconscious level feeds the idea, I don't know what's wrong with me. You know what's wrong with me. You tell me what's wrong with me. Okay, I'm going to do that because you said so.
Right. Uh-huh.
So in holistic counseling, if the patient doesn't get it, the practitioner doesn't give it. It doesn't. There are advanced techniques which I teach in the advanced course. So there's a beginner course, a foundation course, where I teach the basic technique and the philosophy behind it, which I'll get to in a moment.
Yeah.
And after that first weekend, it's 3 days, 2.5 days. A practitioner can go and already use that in their practice. They can already start to do it. But then as they work, they start to see, oh my, I have some issues in this kind of situation or that kind of situation. This is a very challenging case. What do I do? The advanced course addresses that and really brings forward some subtleties that are too much for a beginner in the technique to absorb all at once. So we introduce a little bit, actually a lot in the beginning, but then more. So one of the ideas, it's kind of yin yang balancing. So the yin is that the truth exists within all of us and not to give it to somebody, not to push it.
Right.
And believe me, when we start doing this, it's very hard for the practitioner not to be the one that gives.
Right.
Uh-huh. Our ego wants to give, wants to be the one to help, wants to do it. So there's part of the training is in also transforming the ego so that we can allow the divine and the healing power of nature through us to work with the person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
then,
yeah.
I just wanted to tie up that thought. What was I saying? I was talking about the healing power of nature.
Letting go of the ego. Yeah.
Yeah. So letting go of the ego is essential. And as we do that, then we can bring in a little bit of the yang, which is very important because sometimes patients are very stuck and we have to use a little bit of that practitioner-led awareness. And I once taught an osteopath. She was very wise. She said that that's just like an osteopathy. You allow the vital force of the body to guide you through the trauma, and then maybe at the very end you just go and you pop it into place. So it's like what the practitioner does. Right when the person is right there poised, there is some practitioner-led information that we can offer. Once you are okay with not giving it. But if you need to give it, then if you give it, it's your ego that's giving it. And then you have this dynamic where the patient is like deferring to you. And then the whole holistic counseling thing goes in the garbage.
Right. Yeah. I love you're talking about the yin and yang because this sounds very Eastern in general, the way that you're describing how there's not an aggressive approach from the actual practitioner. And something that kind of struck me as I was reading through your book and like some of the ways that you describe the question. So being a Christian, from my perspective, I've done this with the Holy Spirit before, where I've kind of been in that place of being kind of quiet and having questions pop up. And they were very much the questions that you described, the what else, so that you can get down to that final I am statement. So that you can identify where is the lie that you're believing so that it can be released and so that it can be rewritten. It was beautiful the way you described that. And you brought in all of these different philosophies of ways to look at that and describe that same process.
Yeah, thank you. That was such a great synthesis and a great account. I love that. Yeah. Christianity is one path. I mean, sometimes Christians can be a little bit, this is the only path. And I think we all do that in our religious approaches, but anyway, that's an aside, but it's one beautiful path, which is very universal in its essence. And Yeshua, Christ, embodied the I am in its purest form and was a total manifestation of God here. So the Christianity and the yogic and the Taoist and the Buddhist and ultimately this is what Dr. Jim Sensig was fond of saying. The truth is the truth is the truth. And I do believe that 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the way that I look at that from my little spin is all truth is God's truth. If there's truth out there, he made it regardless of
Yeah.
what it's being called. It's
Yes.
real. If it's reflecting reality, it's from him. So
Absolutely. I love that. I totally support that fully, fully, fully. And this philosophy of the I am, it's very simple.
Mhm.
The idea is that who we truly are, beyond our identity, beyond our gender, our skin color, who our name,
Mhm.
our age, is pure consciousness. That's our true nature. It's the only thing which is permanent about us. The consciousness doesn't end.
Mhm.
When we're awake, we're consciously awake. When we're asleep, that conscious self and the body is snoring away on the bed,
Mhm.
but we're dreaming. Or if we're not dreaming, we're in deep sleep, and the consciousness resides in that deep, blissful state, which is blank and very rejuvenating.
Mhm.
But consciousness is the basis of the philosophy of holistic counseling, of the V's dialogue.
Mhm.
And it is actually the magic, and I think it's the magic because it's God, it's the I am.
Yeah.
It's the magic that helps people at a very tight, very difficult situations.
Mhm.
When they're suffering, they feel trapped. They're in a situation in their life that they literally can't get out of.
Mhm.
And I believe that God, as the great orchestrator, puts people in the exact situation that they need to force them to face their karma, if you allow me to use that word,
Mhm.
which is where they're stuck in their evolutionary path.
Mhm.
That these things that are bad, the pain, the suffering that come to us, it's a pressure cooker that squeezes us into making the choice and coming out of the karma to evolve down the road. That's not the best way to describe it, but to return to who we are. That's
Sure.
basically it.
Right. Yeah. And
So yeah, so the I am, if a person, I've noticed this when I'm working with people, if a person is so stuck and so suffering, the only thing that allows them out is to recognize that they are not that thing that they believe themselves to be.
exactly.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that you're kind of focused on helping the physician to heal themselves, how does that translate into being able to help others? Why is that so important to you?
Oh, I love this question. This is like a red rose question. Here you get a red rose. That's so it is remarkable at how deeply wounded naturopaths are.
Really?
And let's not fault them. They're humans. We're human.
Exactly.
We're all wounded.
Mhm.
The thing is, if we don't address that, if we don't look at it, if we don't attempt to understand ourselves better, then it all dwells in the subconscious. And in the subconscious, there are many like keepsakes and locks that a person does not want to go to.
Mhm.
And if they present themselves like energetically to their patient and they're kind of like, oh no, I don't go there, in my anger, in my sadness, in my whatever, there's no way that the person is going to feel comfortable enough to adequately or properly open up their vulnerability to someone who's going, oh no, I don't go there myself.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense.
Also, what's kind of very interesting is that where a practitioner, quote unquote, fails or struggles in the VIS dialogue, that's the dialogue of holistic counseling,
Mhm.
they, it's where they are blocked in their own I am.
Mhm.
It never fails. So a person can be very intellectually aware of the questions to ask and what to do, but they will invariably start to pull control to themselves around their own issues,
Mhm. Yep.
and then they'll be stuck at that place where they're stuck in the dialogue, right? Isn't it's amazing? So that's why Physician Heal Thyself is absolutely essential.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, and I give a shout out to Dr. Charlie Cropley, who is another naturopathic doctor who does focus a lot on that and the importance of that. And I salute him for that as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost like if the physician has a pair of blinders on because they don't want to go into their own issue, they're incapable of seeing it in someone else. Is that similar to what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Or what about, imagine this, they themselves have been wounded.
Mhm.
We're all wounded.
Right.
It's the nature of this world to wound us, and that is intentional. And this is what we're here for on the planet, is to learn who we're not through woundedness, so then we could bring ourselves back. And then that return is like the hoorah that I think bumps the universal creation into the next level.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So if they're wounded, imagine this, a person is wounded and they're like, don't want to go there, can't go there.
Mhm.
When I start to feel the wound, if I get triggered, I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to watch TV. I'm going to eat.
Yeah.
So
Something
then,
distracting.
yeah, they're deflecting. So
Mhm.
in comes wounded patient. Wounded patient sits down. You start talking. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Their pain is coming up. Don't want to go there.
Mhm.
That's the practitioner saying it.
Sure.
So the practitioner has to be comfortable in the pressure, pain of the wound. If they're comfortable in their own wound, they can be comfortable with the patient's wound.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Even
And
if that wound isn't fully resolved yet, you just are okay. You accept it. That's what needs to happen.
right. And so then you're able to go down a road that presents itself. And because if that's where the healing lies for the patient, you have to be willing to walk that road in order
Yes,
for that to happen.
that's right.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so you kind of alluded to this earlier, but the idea that the mental emotional can influence the physical. So what's kind of your overall view of disease? What makes people get sick? What makes them get better?
Well, it's this very thing. You can't, there are exceptions to this, but in general, generally speaking, what makes them sick is where they have chosen to believe something false about themselves or about the reality of nature, about God, about love, relationship, whatever, or anything like that. And that belief is the strongest point. You could almost call it the weakest link in a chain. That's where it will break. But in this case, it's the strongest point around which dense, heavy, unhealthy energies will start to coalesce. And because it's the strongest, it will occupy the attention the most through some manifestation of suffering, so that the person can look at that and resolve their ignorance. I use that in quotations, but they are ignorant of some truth about their nature.
Okay. So in a way, it almost, at least this reminds me of like a blockage in qi from a Chinese medical standpoint, where if there's a blockage, then that's where all of the, you'll have a accumulation, I guess, stagnation or something like that, that indicates that there's a problem here that needs to be resolved. Is that similar?
Exactly. And in the three treasures of Chinese medicine, the Shen governs the qi, which governs the jing, the blood. Okay. But we tend to focus in naturopathic medicine at the second level, not the first level. So we move the blocked energies, we detoxify the body, we get the organs moving, we vitalize with hydrotherapy. We are mostly working at the level of, it's the second level. So we're not just at the allopathic manifestation of the disease and trying to eradicate the symptoms.
Right.
But we're not going to the root cause of it, which is in the mind. The Shen governs the qi. So if the qi is blocked, it's because the mind is blocking it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually going a step beyond where acupuncture would. So back to how it was originating in the first place. Interesting. Okay.
Now on that note, just a quick little ditty. I believe that there are some masterful acupuncturists that can work with the Shen point, the back shu points, their emotional points and stuff, to help liberate the mind as well.
Interesting. And so that would be even without the patient's conscious awareness, or would they have to be on board with that?
Well, maybe they would be like, who knows, but they might be going like, so how's it with the wife, or how's it with your child, right? And they're like, dunk, putting it in the back. Or there's other points too. There's the tips of the finger points that release a lot of energy. And generally speaking, though, the vast majority of acupuncture is at the vital level, and it's not at what influences the vital level.
Interesting. Interesting. So we're talking about acupuncture. What other modalities do you use besides holistic counseling? Or do you use acupuncture? Do you use anything else?
I love acupuncture. When I studied naturopathic medicine, we had a pretty decent acupuncture program. I mean, like compared to like just acupuncture program, probably not as developed, which is true across the board for naturopathic program, right?
There's only so far you can go.
Yeah, I love acupuncture. I don't use it. I love and I do use pretty thoroughly is homeopathy.
Yeah.
Homeopathy is a beautiful adjunctive therapy medicine to holistic counseling. The two are like, they're like perfect for each other.
Yeah.
Because it is unfortunately the case that many people are very, very, very wounded. And even taking a step with the mind to say, no, I don't want to believe that anymore. It's just the emotion is so overwhelming for them in the wound that they are not ready to employ the use of their will, which is just, it doesn't have to be a strong will. It could just be, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
So that homeopathy comes in and then could transform that energy. And then you'll see the difference from appointment to appointment and how deep you could get in the dialogue. So let's say you get X deep. Next time you go Y, and then after you give the remedy, you go Y, and then you give the same or another remedy, you go down to Z.
Yeah. To just push through those emotional blockages. I mean, I often will explain to patients that it's like, when you get the right homeopathic remedy, it opens the door, but it's still up to you whether you walk through it. So
yes,
you have that opportunity to move forward and to move deeper. So
yes. And oddly enough, this is just one of my ongoing theories or observations of nature. I've actually observed that the contrary is also true, that the patient has to make some kind of opening in themselves, some kind of choice, some kind of commitment, and then the remedy is revealed.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Can you explain that a little more? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So let's say a person doesn't stand up for themselves. They never stand up for themselves. They don't have a voice. They don't do anything to stand up for themselves. And then one day they say, you stop that right now. I've had enough of you crossing my boundaries. First time they ever said anything like that.
Right.
Because they initiated the movement towards healing, the remedy presents itself.
Okay. So, all right. Along those lines, question.
Yeah.
If there's a well-chosen remedy that fails to act, do you feel like that's because the person hasn't opened the door for it yet? In some cases.
It could definitely be. And it could also be that there's there's a very deep intention to want to die, to want to be sick, to want to keep holding on to the illness. And that intention hasn't moved and they're not aware of it. So no remedy could come in and make change there.
Shift that because the will has to be in line. That totally makes sense.
The will has to be in line. And of course, there's the traditional homeopathic view of miasmatic blockage there too. So the patient has a miasm, like a ancestral illness, infectious disease, which was suppressed through external means. It got pushed into the genetic code. Then the seed was passed on, and then they have this shadow of the illness. Like if it was syphilitic, they don't have syphilis, but they have the shadow. That's the miasm, is the shadow of the illness.
So it's almost like epigenetics. Is that similar?
I guess so. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. Funny, I don't think I've ever thought to make that parallel, but I could see that. And those are difficult to move because the patient was born with it. The person was born with it, and they've only ever known that way of feeling. So because let's say you were a happy, healthy little kid and then you got wounded and then you're sick. Well, you remember something about the happiness.
Something that happened there.
Yeah. So then you could say, oh yeah, I remember you have this reference, but a miasm is difficult to counsel through because the person has only ever felt that way. Let's say ashamed of themselves. And, the psychotic miasm could also be syphilitic. Then they don't know the feeling of what it's like in this lifetime to not be ashamed. So it could be very hard for them to find that will to change because they don't know it. They have no experience of it. So the remedy could really assist in that way.
Yeah, that would be really hard because one of my favorite questions is, when did this start? When do you remember being totally fine? And then we move forward from that point, because it's so much easier to go back and say, okay, something happened right there. This is
Yes.
where our root issue shifted. But yeah, if somebody can't go back to that, it does make things way more challenging.
Yeah, and you have to really pull out your subtle
Yeah.
skills, right? Like,
Yeah.
find, how are we going to find the way? Because there's always a way, there's always a choice, always.
Mhm.
It's just, how deep do you have to go to see that choice?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
the answer is, most of the time, very, very deep.
Mhm.
So one of the things with holistic counseling is, and this is why talk therapy doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
Sorry. Not so well. I'm not saying it doesn't work at all, but it doesn't work and deeply to move these root things. It's because the person is in their conscious mind. All this stuff is going on in the subconscious.
Yeah.
Now, the subconscious is a mysterious place, but it's not inaccessible. It just takes time.
Mhm.
And because it's shrouded in darkness, it takes patience and perseverance and persistence. You have to keep asking until the person goes, oh, I'm doing that. Yeah. I am doing that. I could see I'm doing that. Now they have conscious awareness of the subconscious. And that's what helps release the choice or
Mhm.
change the choice.
Once it actually rises to the level where someone's aware of it and they can actually do something.
Yeah, exactly. Versus, I don't know, like this, if you've ever heard somebody say it, it's like, oh, you're depressed, just get over it. Like, just think happy thoughts.
Right. Uh-huh.
It's like, thanks a lot,
Yeah,
like,
that's
screw
helpful.
you.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
when you actually get down to that root cause of the depression, then you can get over it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
you have your own amazing story of the myasthenia gravis. So
Yeah.
can you give us any information on how did you use what you're talking about now to help you overcome that?
Well, awesome question. So I had two bouts with myasthenia gravis. One was it was in 1996. So how long ago was that? 26 years ago. Gosh, that's a long time. 26 years ago, I got very sick, and I actually went to the Options Institute in Massachusetts, Barry Neil Kaufman and Samaria Kaufman's beautiful healing center, where they work with autistic kids. Their child was born autistic
Okay.
in the
Wow.
70s.
Mhm.
And there was an amazing movie done and a book written. It's called Sunrise, The Miracle Continues, or something like that.
Mhm.
They worked with him, and they, after 2.5 years of just mirroring him, like the homeopathic parenting technique, you might say,
Mhm.
he had a near genius IQ, totally functional, amazing people,
Wow. How cool.
amazing people.
Yeah.
So Barry Neil Kaufman developed a dialogue called the Optiva dialogue. And I had it done on me. I was the patient, I was the receiver, and a series of questions were asked me. I was quite paralyzed at the time. My arms were extremely weak, my legs,
Mhm.
my eyes, double vision, dysphagia, difficult swallowing. So I was asked a series of questions. I don't remember anything about the dialogue except the last question, after which I had a spontaneous healing.
Wow.
Right there in this beautiful forest nature, I felt my vital energy return. My arms got strong, and I went, holy smokes.
Yeah.
I felt healed. I was spontaneously healed. And the question, it was, what makes you think you need to be perfect?
Mm.
Because I must have said, because I need to be perfect. What
Yeah.
makes you think you need to be perfect? I had never thought about that before. It was never something that I looked at before. It was taken for granted that I had to be perfect.
Yes. 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 Absolutely.
And this doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does, that in the question is the answer. And the answer came to me very clearly. I don't need to be perfect. Holy shit. I just never thought of it before.
Right.
So I had this amazing healing,
Mhm.
and I did pretty well. I'd say for about 20 years. 20 years I don't want to say symptom free, but maybe 1 or 2 or 3% of the symptoms. Once in a while would come on if I was very stressed, very tired. I once fasted for like 12 days and I got a little weak. muscularly, and I was like, okay, maybe I should eat again.
Maybe that's a little long. Yeah.
So yeah. And then yeah, and then I was pretty good until 6 years ago when I had a quantum level deeper experience of the illness. I was much more sick. I had my wife and I got pregnant. So I didn't get pregnant. She got pregnant, but we were going to have a baby. And I just decided, I made this really silly, unwise choice, which was obviously ripe for the addressing. And the idea was, my life's over. My devotion to enlightenment, to evolving to God, to whatever you call it, self-realization, was so obsessive that I believed that because I was going to have a child and have to have responsibility for an infant, that it was it. That was it. I was not going to attain my most important desire. It couldn't be farther from the truth. Like I have 2 kids now, and just to say, like, it's been what has helped me evolve. That is the thing that I needed, and that's why it came. But I didn't think that then. So I got very sick. That idea, that's it, my life's over, really what I had inception in myself. You know that movie Inception?
Yes.
I incepted myself.
Yeah.
And not a few months later, I started to really get so sick and I almost died. So I literally said, my life is over. And then my life almost became over. But there was a lot of deep grappling with that idea. And the transformation from that healing has been deeper than the first time. And God willing, there's not a third round. That's in God's hands, but I'm really hoping that that's enough.
So that's amazing. So do you offer training to other practitioners in your counseling method?
Yes.
Okay.
I do. Thank you. That's like a dragon sticker question. You get a dragon sticker now. I do. I offer training. It's a program, it's a certification program. It's a really beautiful container that the person comes in, they learn the first course in foundations. Then they start practicing the dialogue. I start working with them one-on-one with the physician heal thyself stuff. So we go really, really deep. I help them with transformation with homeopathy as well. So they might have maybe 3 or 4 appointments and they're practicing. And then there's an in-between course they do online. And then they do the advanced course a few months later. The advanced course, after that, we start doing mentoring. And the mentoring is simply like, let's say you're in the course, you take my course, you would record yourself working with someone doing the V's dialogue. Then we watch it together and I would make suggestions and critique, offer suggestions. And I do the Buddhist hand slap before I do it. Do you know what the Buddhist hand slap is?
No.
It's really interesting. So Buddhist philosophies, in particular Tibetan Buddhists, they debate each other, as many different, religious pathways. They have debates about what is true, what's not true, and who said this and who said that. So before they argue with each other, the person who's presenting the argument slaps like that, and that is to indicate to be forgiven for any karma that they might engender through this discussion, through this argument, through this idea. So, and it's also asking for forgiveness, if they do transgress in that way. It's very beautiful.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I do that with the practitioner to say, hey, I know that you are a manifestation of the I am. You are a child of God. In you resides this purely innate intelligence that is straight from the divine. So don't let me telling you something, don't defer to me and lose that center in yourself.
Right.
But please allow me to help you along the way, right? Like,
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a disclaimer at the beginning of the discussion.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I hereby will be.
Do not hold me accountable for anything that's about to happen.
What is so interesting is initially the dialogues will often turn into a physician heal thyself dialogue. Because I say, hey, what are you doing here? I see you're doing something. You're really holding back. What's going on? What's going on behind the scene there? And they're like, well, I'm afraid that I might offend them if I ask them this difficult question. What is that fear of offending about? Is that something that you feel in your life? Oh yeah, I'm afraid of offending everybody. Okay, we got to do a physician heal thyself moment here.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody is interested in your program, where do they go?
Oh, okay, sweet. So they go to holistic without a W.
Okay.
HOLISTIC dash counseling with one L.
Okay.
.ca.
Awesome. Okay.
And I have a new program that will be starting in the fall. I haven't updated the website because we're still underway in the second one, but I'll be updating it with the dates. I believe the first is the end of October, and then the advance will be in March.
Okay.
And I will be offering it in beautiful East Tennessee.
Oh, very nice.
Gorgeous. It's really gorgeous in the mountains, and the energy is very conducive here for it. Yeah, so that's the program. That's where I'm training people. Thank you for that.
So I will link in the show notes to that URL for anybody who wants to find it. Is there anything I have not asked you that you want to make sure that you leave with our audience?
Anything you have not asked me? Well, I'm sure there's lots of things, but this is I feel pretty whole. Like nothing popped into my mind. I feel very grateful to have had this beautiful discussion with you. Deep to naturopaths, you know, walking down the road of philosophy and recognizing very important things that are, you know, not the norm within the school, within the colleges these days.
True. Yeah.
And I have to say, I really appreciate, you know, you're actively and obviously Christian. You put your Christian foot forward. I salute you for that. I honor you for that, because again, there's been this subtle judgment around being openly spiritual and following a spiritual religious path because of the subtle judgment of the forces of opposition, if I may, to ridicule the divine, to belittle it, to make it seem like there's no place in that in science. And that kind of goes back. There's a history of that where the church split from science. And doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. Science emanates from that which is the divine, and the church is representative of that which is divine. So it doesn't have to be a split.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we shoot ourselves in the foot when we try to separate the two, you know?
Yeah. So back to the idea of all truth is God's truth. So scientific truth, if it's science, it's from him, just like everything else we're talking about.
Amen.
So, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for all your time and wisdom, Dr. Block. I so appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, my honor. Thank you too, Dr. DeVille. It's my pleasure. Thank you.